syntax.
Sorry, everybody. All right, we're live. Hello. We're doing a little pre-chat. Let's see. Today is November 11th, 2021. And this is the Backdrop Weekly Developer Call. It's been a couple of weeks since we've gotten together. Last week we didn't have a call, and then the week before we had Backdrop Live hangover, basically. So welcome back. We'll do some quick introductions. My name is Nate Lampton. I'm Quick Sketch on the internet. I'm a core committer, and I am in Oakland, California. Joseph, could you give us an introduction?
Sure. Hi, I'm Joseph. I'm a developer based out of Las Vegas, Nevada. And yeah, I probably won't be doing much backdrop stuff because we're moving.
Robert?
I'm Robert Lang, bug folder on the internet from Altadena, California. Pass it to Justin.
I'm Justin Christopherson. I'm in Denver, Colorado, and just help out with infrastructure and when I can. And sometimes I put modules. And great. I'll pass it to Peter.
Cool. Hello. Just looking here today, but Peter from Australia. I do some backdrop stuff when I get a chance. I don't know, it hasn't gone yet, sorry.
It's me again, so I'll go, yeah. So hi, my name is Greg. I'm joining from Greece. Generally interested in anything related to backdrop in any way that I can help. So yeah, let's get going.
All right. Let's see. Well, before we get into discussion items for this week, we do a little contrib module update and community update. We've had several new projects since our last meeting. Inline entity form, that's very exciting. I'll take a look at that. Has been ported. Basic entity plus axioma theme, a new theme, so that's exciting. We don't see themes as often as modules. I think there's some recipe examples coming in. There's a module called sample animal content, which I think
That's from theme.
that I think is recipe based. And then the pirate filter, the pirate module got ported as part of Backdrop Live and is now in the contrib repository with a release. So that's very exciting. So let's see, discussion items for this week. We've really fallen out of the pattern of everything since Backdrop Live. We previously had been making forum posts and soliciting ideas from the forum posts, but we kind of fell out of that. But we'll try to pick that back up because I think that was a really productive way to start discussion items. But there are a couple of items that we prepared prior to the meeting that we think would be good to go over again. One of which is the reference module. The reference module discussion over in issue 1301 has seen a lot of activity this past week about possibly like making a change in direction. There's a lot of kind of frustration being expressed that we haven't made a lot of progress recently, and so we're looking back at the different options for how do we make this possible, or how do we move forward on this. And I only just checked in on it right before the call. Joseph has been involved in this issue. Greg keeps on top of all of these things. Greg, do you think you would be up for giving a little recap about where we are?
Well, actually, I think we should leave that to Joseph because he's done a wonderful job summarizing in one of the latest comments. So, yeah.
Yeah. So,
go ahead.
So I guess I'll try to do my best job at summarizing. Obviously, a lot of the people who are involved are not in the meeting right now, so but a lot of there are several people have brought up that they think it might be better if we, instead of building a new module, just use entity reference since it is already ported and, sorry, I'm in dog loud. Since it's already ported and has several hundred installs. rather than going through the effort of finishing up the reference module. Going back through some of the older issues, it seemed like some of the reasons that people wanted to create a new module was to get away from legacy verbiage and user interface stuff. And so the idea was to basically create a new module that was similar to entity reference, but didn't reference in the user interface or in the function names the fact that basically didn't reference entities as an idea, because it's more of a developer term and not really helpful for users. And then there was some concern in the past about dealing with C tools and porting the module and how it would be really complicated, but that was a long time ago. And since then, the entity reference module has been ported. So I don't think that's as big of an issue as it used to be. As far as the work that I've been doing on it, when I've been building out a feature, I often just take that feature from entity reference and rename it and rename all the functions and get it to, and just integrate it into the reference module. So large parts of it, especially the stuff I've worked on, is actually just exactly the same as the entity reference module. So I think so I guess that's kind of like where it is, what's been said. One thing I did bring up in the issue is that if we want to keep all of these things in mind, like take the entity verbiage out of the UI and then not conflict with any existing project, because that was another issue, is people didn't want to be forced to switch modules immediately on existing sites, which would have been a problem if we had used the same name as an existing module. So anyway, so my point was basically like, we could just take entity reference and rename the stuff and change the UI to make people who are concerned about the user experience for non-technical users, and then just put that in.
Yeah, and also another thing that concerns people is moving from Drupal 7 to Backdrop, and the fact that if whatever solution we put there should have an upgrade path for more relevant reference modules in D7. Now, whether we scope that out and we leave it for later, that's up for decision.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that had turned people off previously, was that the matter of an upgrade path is really difficult. And so one of the things we have discussed previously was not doing the upgrade path in the initial version, because that's a really big barrier to putting it into core. That the upgrade path could potentially come as a follow-up later into core, or be handled in contrib, in various projects, like, because the upgrade, there's lots of things to upgrade between. That there's the node and user references modules, and then there's entity reference module, and then there's the new contrib reference module, and then there's also term references, the ones that are in core. So that's 4 different systems that we need to provide migrations for, and it's like, and doing all of those is pretty unlikely. I think core's personal responsibility would be term references into references if we ever pursue that. But even that, we've said, even that's not really a blocker to putting in the core reference module. We, again, we want to make as few blockers as possible. Yeah, Joseph, you have some good points there about, like, if you start changing entity reference in any way, it's basically not compatible, or it's not the same thing anymore. It's like it would be making a 5th module if we tried to take entity reference and then like just change it a little bit to make it core appropriate. Then it's really making yet another module. I think there's also a big problem there that entity reference, that Backdrop version depends on entity plus module. And so Entity Plus module, again, like either we would need to, if we were going to make it compatible and work with all of the existing things, either we would need to move Entity Plus into Core 2, which would be in itself kind of weird, or...
Oh no, so we discussed that, and it seems that the only bit that we required from Entity Plus was the Entity View function, which we already have a core issue to bring that in. So that
Well, I think
sorry, go ahead.
it also heavily makes use of entity metadata wrapper.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah,
I
so
see. I
there's
saw who was it that made the comment that, yeah, it was you, Joseph, that said it's less complicated than what we're already trying to do. And I agree, but the last time that I tried to wrap my head, pun intended, around entity meta wrappers, I got confused. So I eventually, for the thing that I wanted to do at the moment, I did it, but it took me a while. So it's a thing to consider.
Right. I think that, yeah. I think the biggest problem with entity metadata wrapper is just that its errors are often non-existent. Like it just gives you the white screen of death with, instead of giving you any useful error messages. But I don't know. I personally feel like it's less complicated than having to look up the array structure that we keep all our field data in.
Yeah.
But I guess.
But it's a big, it would be a big change, big, that it fundamentally changes the way that the objects work. And it doesn't really, it doesn't really change the objects themselves, because the metadata wrappers are weird that they literally they, instead of referring to the node, they put a wrapper around the node object, and then that wrapper, you can then call fields and chain them together to get through multiple levels of references, all just with arrows. So it makes it easier to get through relationships and chaining, which is why these reference modules tend to use them. Yeah.
The point that Jen made is that maybe it's easy to implement things, but it would be difficult for less technical savvy people to contribute.
Which,
if it's complicated, if the code is complicated, then it means that we rely on less people in the community to know what's happening with that subsystem, subcomponent. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I am of the opinion that the approach that we've selected, to use reference module, the new reference module that we've written, is still the best approach, because it's the only one that we originally started from the beginning saying this is going to be for core, and was built without external dependencies and without baggage, that we could actually just take that module and put it wholesale into core. I don't think that we can do that with entity reference module. You can't just put it into core as it is right now. You'd have to make some changes, and then it's no longer compatible with the entity reference from contrib. So that's where my big concern is that I don't think we can just plop entity reference into core. And so we'd be making another option.
Can we just bite the bullet, go with the reference module, and then work towards migration paths? Would that satisfy most of the community? Or because Doc Wilmot's main concern was that we're building something from scratch when we can grab something that's ready, or assumingly ready, right? That was the argument that he brought forward. So can we descope the upgrade path for now and make it a priority, though, for the rest of the year, because we have to look for the end of life from Drupal 7. In the meantime, people can go to contrib, the respective contrib modules in Backdrop, as in Drupal, and when the upgrade paths are ready, we can ditch the contrib modules in favor of what we have in core. Would that be a compromise?
I think yes. And I think we've been here before and reached the same thing previously. That yes, that upgrade paths should be handled separately and later, and possibly in contrib first, and then be moved into core as they become options, as they become viable. And we can surface them in the same way that we did for the emoji update, for example, that it would flag a notice on your status report, giving you the option to proceed forward if you so wanted to move from one to the other. But moving the data is very different than moving your functionality, and that's is where all of the problems come. Is that like, sure, we could copy your data from existing fields into new fields, but there's all of the theming and the configuration around those fields, the way that they're placed. We can't really provide a full automatic migration from one of these other modules into the core module. We can only migrate the data.
So would the plan be that any new installation, like any new site that was built directly on Backdrop, would use the core reference module, and then people that are coming from D7 would use the respective contrib module, and eventually when the upgrade paths are there, they can migrate, or whatever we call it, to the core solution?
I would say that's a good summary. Yeah, if they're looking for the easiest path forward, then they could use the matching contrib module.
Yeah.
But if they're looking for the, like, we'll say like most, like the easiest solution moving forward, you know, like lowering the maintenance long term, then they should migrate into the core one. And new sites would of course use the core one. I mean, barring some exceptions, you know, there are situations where like the contrib solutions become more popular than the core ones, though. You know, like a good example that might be like contact module versus web form. You know, a lot more sites end up using web form than they do the contact module.
Yeah, but the simplest form of it is that people stick with, like, if it's just a contact task form, they stick with the contact module and they stay away from. Yeah, I think that's acceptable.
Yeah, Justin, do you have something to add?
Well, I just want to give a quick update for I have to drop in a couple minutes. But I done some, is it okay?
Yeah, sure.
Last weekend, I made changes to the OpenSSL configuration. It was brought to our attention that we're using older, weaker ciphers for that. So I made some changes there, and I regenerated the certification, the cert for that to 4096 strength. We haven't really, I'm not sure where to document that, so I just thought I'd mention it. And I think Jen had said I should open a ticket and close it, but not to be too specific. But
there was someone in the queue that mentioned that they were having issues with checking for updates, but they sorted it out in the end. And there's an article that explains how to remove any stale certificates in the chain from your computer to stop you from having. So all the sites were working, but besides his local MUMP installation or something like that, it wasn't a big issue, but yeah.
That was me.
Oh, that was you. There you go.
Okay. Well, I hardened the server for.
Yeah, I think this is a separate but related thing. Yeah, thanks, Justin, for doing that. Have we reached back out to the person that reported that and said that we've implemented the changes that they recommended?
I'm not sure I know who reported it.
Okay.
It was Robert. That's what we said.
I mean, Jen reported it to me, and I let her know that I
okay.
took care of it.
Yeah, we got an email through the security channel, actually, that there was like, it wasn't really a vulnerability so much as like a recommendation to like just harden things.
Yeah.
Right.
So for hardening stuff, Justin, like that doesn't need to be secret or private. So I do think like just opening the issue, describing what you did, and then closing it in the backdropcms.org queue would be good for posterity.
Okay.
And it would also give us something to reference in the email back to the person that sent it in.
Yeah.
Cool.
Sounds perfect. Okay, I'll make the issue.
All right. Thanks, Justin.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
Yeah.
Okay, so circling back to references. Yeah, I mean, I'll post my comment because I don't want to just let this discussion go in here, but I'm hesitant to do it just because it's like, it's against the tide of what's in this issue. So, but it's, I don't know. I just don't want to, I really don't want us to just be circling, you know, with us saying these approaches are better than those, you know. But it mostly comes down to where the will is, you know, like who's going to be doing the work. because any approach would work if they put in the effort.
Right. Yeah. And I've been saying I'm going to work on this and just haven't had time to put on it.
I've sort of heard bits and pieces of this conversation, so sorry if I've missed something important, but it sounds to me like a similar situation with like B versus Drush. Like Drush has come over from Drupal, it's got all this sort of baggage with it, similar to like entity reference, whereas reference, building that for Backdrop core is sort of like starting from scratch, building it for Backdrop use case similar to B, so it doesn't have all the baggage, it's more streamlined, easy to maintain, etc. So in a perfect world, I'd say that should be the one to go into core from what I've heard. And I mean, the people pushing for something to go into core now that's ready, it's like, well, we do have contrib, it's working, like entity references in contrib. So I'd sort of be leaning more towards, let's put something in core that's better, long-term, easy to maintain, etc., even if it means repeating and people can still use contrib for now.
Mhm.
Yeah. Oh, thanks, Peter.
I think another thing I think might be a factor for other people is that other contrib modules that extend entity reference have also, like, lots of those have been ported, and pretty much all of them will have to be rewritten.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So
Or same thing as before. That's like, well, they can continue to exist in their ported versions, and depending on entity reference module, even though like there's like the direct approach is, well, just do exactly the same thing as Drupal 7, but that might not be the most sustainable approach.
right.
Yep. Robert, do you have anything you want to add, since I don't think you've weighed in yet?
Nothing to add.
Okay. All right. Well, I think we kind of talked that one through as much as we can for today. There's other items that we can move on to. I've been spending some time this week looking at CKEditor 5, the new version of CKEditor. CKEditor 4 is deprecated and scheduled to reach an end of life sometime next year. Greg opened an issue quite some time ago, 4122, that's just like the strategy question around, like, are we going to move to CKEditor 5? And in the past, I didn't think that it was entirely obvious that we'd be moving to CKEditor 5, because there were some major architectural changes in CKEditor 5 that made it really difficult for us to adopt wholesale. The one really big holdup is that it wasn't content compatible, backwards compatible with previous content. So literally, if you edited content with CKEditor 5, it would destroy some of the content in the process of editing it, which is completely non-viable from an existing content and backwards compatibility standpoint. So then I was thinking, well, we need to have some way to like safely not show the editor if it wasn't content compatible, and then do show the editor if it is content compatible, all of this stuff. That problem's been solved. The great thing. The CKEditor project like kind of changed course a little bit on that, and they made it so that if it encounters content that it can't edit, then it puts it into a read-only block inside of the editor. And so it's not like ideal in that if like you have markup that isn't supported, say like I think data definitions, DD and DL tags were raised as particular points that CKEditor doesn't have a way of editing those things, but they're allowed in the default tag list of Backdrop and Drupal. That previously it would just like delete them when you edited the content, and now it just puts them into a read-only block that it just doesn't touch because it doesn't know how to deal with them. So the new version of CKEditor 5 takes a much more like component-driven approach, where each paragraph is like a draggable thing, kind of like Gutenberg, the WordPress editor, where it's like you can move individual chunks of content and it puts everything into a chunk. I'm not sure if that's the technical term, but so that you can move it up and down, each paragraph, each image, each table, rather than just letting everything be editable altogether. It's like built up of dozens of editable parts that are all orderable in some way. So that new approach raised a whole bunch of technical problems up until this most recent change that they were like, hey, here's a way to handle existing content, which makes all of this much more viable for Backdrop. The other thing that I have yet to figure out totally, and let's go back to what we're referencing here too. That the Drupal in the Drupal world, things have moved really pretty far ahead. There's a CKEditor 5 module available in Contrib, and there is an issue to put in that Contrib module into core for Drupal 10 that is currently RTBC, ready to be reviewed and tested by community. I tried it out this week, and it's not very polished yet, but it does mostly seem to work. It looks really pretty promising. Some really big differences is that CKEditor has moved heavily from using modals and right-click. Lots of people have probably noticed that right-click gets hijacked by CKEditor, and it's heavily dependent on it, which is a problem because that disables your operating system spell check, for example. But now it stopped using right-click and it stopped using modals. So when you're modifying a table, it does it all in these little pop-up bubbles instead of into modals. So that also has an impact on Backdrop in the way that we deal with links and images, that we use modals for those things. But we use Backdrop modals for those things, not the CKEditor modals. So I think we actually are likely to continue using those modals for doing things where it's like where you're inserting Backdrop content into CKEditor. We'll probably continue to use modals, our own modals, but now we just won't have two kinds of modals, which is great. We used to have both CKEditor modals and Backdrop modals. Now we'll only have one. Anyway, I'm kind of talking a whole bunch about all of the things that are available in CKEditor 5. It looks pretty viable to me now. I'm very excited about the possibilities there. And yeah, I think that pursuing that soonish would be probably pretty good. I think that the approach that Drupal uses is also a smart one. Like, let's make a contrib module, and then let's put it into core and let's deprecate the old one, because the CKEditor module in Backdrop is actually fairly light, that it really mostly just includes the library and the connection points, but almost all of the actual work of wiring up an editor is in the filter module for us. So if we make a new module, it mostly will be very specialized to the functionality of CKEditor 5. However, the toolbar arrangement code is quite gnarly. We'll probably end up duplicating a lot of that stuff in the new module, but that's probably fine. So anyway, that's a summary on that whole little thing. I think that we should continue pursuing it and maybe actually start pursuing it really in earnest. I was really waffling on it because of that content problem, but now it seems like that's not so much of a problem.
Yeah, if it matters, sort of like stress-wise, CKEditor 4 is going to be supported until 2023.
Yeah,
and so it gives us a couple of years, which is good. I'm concerned about the thing that you said, because I wasn't aware of it, that it sort of like the previously edited software, content gets locked. What does that leave? What are the options that the content editors are left them with? They can just copy and paste and adapt in a new field or something like that manually.
They can switch. They can use the source button and then edit it in the source button. Okay. Yeah, but the number of things that are like that aren't a whole lot of them. Like most normally formatted content, especially if it was created in CKEditor 4, will be able to be edited in CKEditor 5. Some of the things that it doesn't know how to handle are when there isn't a wrapping paragraph tag, because really old legacy Drupal content, it has that automatic paragraph break functionality where you didn't actually need to put p tags around stuff. The CKEditor won't know how to deal with content that's not wrapped in a tag. when it looks at it, it's just going to be like, I don't know what to do with this because it doesn't have any tag at all in the source code.
Mhm.
So that's an example of like content that it wouldn't know what to do with, and it would just lock it and it would put it into a text block. And so to fix it, you'd have to switch to source mode, put p tags around it, and then switch back out of source mode.
If that's the most common use case, though, maybe it can be automated, but I understand because I'm thinking now content editors should not have to know HTML to edit their text.
Right.
But yeah, that's why I brought up that question. So there is a solution, but it's not content editor friendly.
Yeah, and there could be possibly some contrib solutions. I guess maybe we could build something into core, but it's risky, you know, like I don't think it's something that we could assume to do. But something like a like a auto p remover or something like that, where it would loop through all of the fields in the system, run the auto p filter on all of your content, and then resave all of the content in the database with the paragraph filter like applied, because applying the paragraph filter adds all of the p's, right? And so that would make it so that all of your existing content would like become retroactively like compatible. But that's kind of a risky operation to
Revisions,
just be doing.
revisions though.
Yeah, you could do it with revisions, but there's lots of content that uses filters that isn't necessarily it's something that supports revisions. Yeah, because it also ends up in like the descriptions for content types and your views configurations, and I'm not really sure if we would need to deal with all of those situations too. But yeah, but you're right. Yeah, could do revisions or not. You could actually edit the tables too. So
Yeah, my purpose when I created that issue there was that sure we have a person that is has worked with CK editor before in the team and is comfortable, but there's a lot of work that is being done by our Drupal brethren, and we can leverage that. We can see how much of that can be backported or cross-ported or what have you.
yeah.
What about the idea of shipping with both libraries and allowing old content to be edited with CK Editor 4 and new content with CK Editor 5, and then deprecating CK Editor 4 in Backdrop 2?
Yeah, I think we should consider it. You know, that we should look into that option and do the same thing as some other things where we would turn on CK Editor 5 module by default, turn off CK Editor 4 module, and this is like on out-of-box installs, you'd get 5.
Yeah.
But for existing installs, you'd probably continue using 4. Maybe we'd throw a notice up on the status report,
Something like that.
encouraging people to move to 5. Yeah, that sort of thing. I don't think that we would be able to wholesale flip people from 4 to 5 without a transition period. Yeah.
Cool.
And I'm not sure what that transition looks like, but you know, yeah, I think that we should do it in steps.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm excited about that. I was really frustrated by CK Editor's architectural decisions, but Greg, kind of like what you had mentioned, is that the relationship between CK Editor and the Drupal folks is really pretty good. And I personally also, like you were implying, I was part of the team that put CK Editor into Drupal in the first place. And so like I've had dinner with the CK source people and talked to them. I'm on a first name basis with them, you know, like, so we have a lot of options there to like, you know, facilitate a better relationship. And I think that must be where this backwards compatibility thing came from, is that Drupal's like, we're stuck, you know, like, and so they helped, you know. And there was the same thing where CK Editor 4 was in many ways architected for Drupal 8. That there were certain things like the way the images are handled in CK Editor was made for Drupal. And so I feel like that same sort of collaboration is happening again here, where Drupal had some pretty major problems, same things that we did, and CK Editor has been accommodating and helpful to facilitate those needs. So, but I'm excited about just the general direction of CKEditor 5. I like not hijacking the right click. I like the not using modals all over the place. Table management is way better. It has a markdown syntax, not like you can paste markdown, but like if you do like, star space, it automatically says that's a bulleted list. If you do hash sign, start typing, it's like that's an H1. 2 hash signs, that's an H2. It does all of those things where, a lot of other platforms, even like Google Docs has adopted this, right? Like shorthand for like really quickly converting markdown syntax into HTML just by typing it. So I'm very excited about a lot of those major enhancements that it could bring to the table.
Yeah, I think we even have an issue in the backdrop doc queue for enabling markup filter. So the benefits for like with adopting 5 would be multiple, and also I sort of like see that there's some kind of editor war in the world, and I guess Gutenberg has won over WordPress, and CKEditor needs to catch up, because I wasn't aware of that too recently, but they have enterprise versions, which are paid versions, which allow multiple people to collaborate on the same
collaborative editing.
Yeah, which is a valid use case for people that want to get a license and do that for bigger sites and stuff. So that I guess that's one of the reasons why they're being accommodating, because Drupal is a big market. It's not a small market, right? So yeah, cool.
Yeah. Okay, well, that's kind of what I had to say about CKEditor. I think that we should start bringing that back to the forefront. I'd really kind of been delaying any activity on it because it didn't seem like there was a real clear direction, because it didn't seem like moving to 5 was viable. Now I think it might be. And staying within CKEditor instead of moving to another editor also just gives us a lot of clarity, in our direction, rather than rehashing an entire editor evaluation all over again. Although the new version of CKEditor 5, we will need to rewrite our plugins for image and link handling, because the syntax is different. So it's not trivial. Okay. Welcome, Tim. Do you have anything that you want to add before we move on to the next kind of category? Okay.
Oh, I'm good. Thanks.
Well, those are kind of the things that I had slated for today. And from the last agenda, we've got issue 5245, Indigo Zella's PHP-CS work that she's working on to make it so that we can get syntax validation on all new pull requests. There hasn't been any updates on this issue in a long time, but she laid out, we have this problem that she has this proof of concept that adds syntax validation right now, but it's using some legacy code that needs to be updated, and it's pulling from a strange location. She laid out 3 options. One is we live with the outdated version of PHP-CS for now, version 1.5. Or number 2, we create an independent repository for only the coding sniffs compatible with the new version, use that in our GitHub Actions, and then start adding validators one at a time in the new repository. Or option 3, fix everything in the backdrop coder review module, and then use that as the basis for our checks. She says the benefit of having it in our workflow is great enough that we should prioritize getting something in sooner rather than later, which means option number 1, use the outdated version, or option number 2, create a new repository that doesn't have very many validators in it, and then iteratively add the validators to the new repository. I'm of the opinion that we should pursue number 2, because just the very basic one of tabs versus spaces would give us that would eliminate half of the coding issues. so I'm in favor of doing that as the approach, and I'll post a comment after this meeting. But does anyone else have thoughts or anything to add on that? Okay. Okay. Let's see. So we don't have anything on the agenda for the next milestone, unless someone wants to bring something up for 1.20.2.
Two.
Yeah, it looks like our agenda isn't actually updated yet here because I have 1.20.1. Yeah, 1.20.1 PHP 8 support we completed. We have not only do we have all tests passing on PHP 8, all tests are currently being run against PHP 8 right now. So we have right now 5.3.7 4, I think, and 8.0. So now we're running the tests against 3 branches of PHP on every pull request, which is a huge accomplishment. Huge thanks to Indigo Zella, who really spearheaded all of the updates there and got us really, really far along there. Not to mention the GitHub Actions work that she did that also enabled the PHP 8 work. So just kudos all up and down the board for Indigo Zella, really pushing forward our development practices there. Okay, let's see. So next up is the 1.21 milestone. That will be the next minor version of Backdrop that will be coming out in January. There's been some new issues that have been added to the milestone, which I hope means that they have advocates now. So we have the provide a new hidden path content type out of the box, issue 4903. This issue is a lot about making it so that the out-of-box backdrop experience is a lot better. I think this is the one, this is planning on adding a card content type, which has its path hidden so that you don't have individual node pages. But then on top of that, it's also now talking about changing the way that the home page looks and putting some default cards out of the box onto the home page on a new backdrop install. I haven't been checking in on this, but there's a lot of activity in the past week even. Tim, you've got a hand in this every now and then. Is there anything you'd like to say about it?
Sure. It's my pull request, so I'm kind of familiar with what's going on.
Oh, you're the advocate for it. No.
And I'm the advocate for it. Yes. I think most people are in support of this. There hasn't been there's been a number of comments in the last week, but not actually movement on the issue. But we had about a month ago, we had a full UX design meeting where we talked about this. And the next stage is really me updating the pull request to reflect the feedback from that. Indigo Zella was asking sort of what the blocker was on this issue. And in my view, the blocker has just been me having the time to take the feedback I've gotten and create another pull request for another round of feedback. So that's where that's.
Great. Okay, so next issue we've got is add display settings for the book module navigation, issue 1976. I don't see an advocate on this one. Jen opened it a long time ago, but Herb Duel filed a pull request just 2 weeks ago that looks like it's pretty complete, in terms of adding this functionality. And so this issue doesn't seem to have an advocate, but it does seem to have a pull request and is fairly straightforward. And so I think that's how it got that milestone, is hoping that this would be a real easy win. Book pages, they're really pretty simple. That there's the content of the node, and then the book navigation ends up down at the bottom, for go up to the parent chapter or to the next page. And this just makes it so that you can move the book navigation in the display settings for the fields, which seems like a really obvious and beneficial enhancement. So that pull request currently needs review, both code
so I think
and
that the milestone was added by Herb as well. So he meant, I'm assuming that he meant to say that he's advocating for it.
Yeah. Okay. Let's see. Also,
by the way, sorry, my only concern, which I said in a comment to the thing, is that whether this should be per book settings or global settings. So I would appreciate some feedback from others on this. Because as it's built now, it's built as a one thing for every book.
Yeah, as a global thing. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, let's see. Next up, we have enable telemetry on new installs, issue 5253. Greg, looks like this is your issue as a follow-up. I think that this also doesn't have an advocate on it, but
Well, it's a task that we need to get done because it was added in the previous release, and it has subtasks, which is basically add more things that we want to collect. So certain things like themes being enabled, which will sort of like unblock or give us some insight for other issues that we are contemplating whether or what to do with those issues. So yeah, I'm not directly advocating for that. The issue that I'm advocating for is 1040, which I'm not sure it's in the list.
yeah, okay. And I think this, I imagine this new issue is trying to sidestep some of the problems from the existing issue 3168, the separate checking issue.
Yeah.
And so it would be helpful to put a little bit more scope in this issue with a direction that does avoid those problems. And I'm not, because I'm even going back to that other issue, I can't remember what the lowest conflict approach would be.
I think that from memory, what I remember as a remaining thing from the title of the issue is just opt in or opt out, which is more ethical and how to go about doing it. So Tim is shaking his head. No?
Well, that's one issue, but I think the other issue was about separating it from checking for updates.
But that's a separate issue number. Like this specific is enable it in the next release, but enable it in an ethical way and decide whether it's going to be opt-in or opt-out, polish various things in the UI, things like that. So I don't think it's the basic task is very small. It can be done in a day, like enable the module by default. But we need to make decisions, right? How do we go about doing it? That's the thing.
Yeah, and you're right that if we just made it an opt-out system, I mean, there's a lot of visibility that's in telemetry already. You know, it adds its own reports page. It tells you what data is being sent. It puts something on the status report page telling you that it's reporting data. So it being on if you poke around the interface, it's very clear that it's reporting data and what data is being reported. So having it be opt-out would be viable, I think, although it does still make me nervous that it just doesn't fit with the normal pattern of software installs. That's pretty typical that you get asked if you want to report data after doing a new install.
I've been doing some research, and I mean, I think it definitely, arguments are made both ways. For me, the big thing is a policy. I feel like if we're going to make it opt-out, we need to have a real clear policy in advance of doing that. And so that might be the blocker and it sounds like it's a PMC issue, and I think the PMC just hasn't been active enough to act on that. And maybe we need to kickstart that because some sort of a policy would help us.
Yeah, because you're right. That would really answer that question for us.
Yep.
Yeah, because there's a lot of questions about the user interface and like putting something scary during the install process. And yeah, we need to figure that out.
And also what we do for existing sites. So
I think the opt-out option is much less scary if there's a real clear public policy. But if there isn't, that makes it's like you're making us opt out of something that we don't even know what it is and where it might go in the future.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. Let's see. We're almost out of time. I'll just mention the last issue here. Issue 5044, adding additional CSS classes to regions for flexible layout templates. So yeah, I'm not quite sure who the advocate is on this one either. It has a pull request that needs work that was filed by Herb Duel. But yeah, this has to do with the flexible layout builder and just adding some additional functionality there to make it so you could give your regions names. But I don't think I don't see any real updates there this week. Okay. Well, I think that we'll just call it there. That's we're at the top of the hour.
Just really quick, because issue 1040 is what I'm advocating for. I added the milestone candidate minor tag. I need someone, because it can't be me, can't be the same person, because I'm advocating for it to actually add the milestone, and then maybe we can discuss it in one of the next.
Okay. Yeah, I'll read over this. This is adding inline form errors.
Yes.
This is an extraordinarily difficult task. but we can talk about it next week.
Yes, exactly. I started digging into it, and there's peripheral things that need to be done. So at least I need to start working towards it.
Sure. I think, yeah, I'm going to post a comment that I moved it into 121 just so that we can discuss it.
Yes. Thanks.
Okay. Okay. All right. Yeah, that'll be a fun little rabbit hole to go down next week.
Yep. All right.
Okay.
Cool. Thanks.
All right. Well, thanks everybody for joining this meeting, and thank you everyone out there who watches and all of our contributors that work on Backdrop in big and small ways. Your work is always appreciated. So, thank you everybody. We'll catch you guys all on the internet.